been seeking, right? I've done a lot of stuff to heal everything.
And we're still
I've
doing
gone,
it.
Yes. And I've gone to
10 years
Peru, and I'm waiting for the sky to open up and all the visions and all the feelings. And then I hear the medicine say, go home and sit with the mundane. Is that really the truth? Is that really the truth?
Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to announce today's first ever Truth Seeker Society podcast. And this is going to be kind of a new series that will come whenever I meet a teacher or have a conversation that I'd like to share with you guys. So this is just episode 1 of the Truth Seeker Society podcast. And it will eventually evolve, and I'll get better at interviewing as it flows forward. But I wanted to share this one with you guys because it's with someone very special and very important to my growth and my journey. So it is a very big honor to share that with you guys and help that to be a part of your journey as well. So today's guest is Sonya Arias, and she is my teacher. She's been my teacher for about 3 years now. We've been friends, and also, I've been her student. And I have nothing but great things to say about Sonya as a human, as a person, as a teacher, as someone on their spiritual journey as well. She's very grounded in her understanding of spirituality and is always on a process of evolving herself as well. So I have a lot of respect and love for Sonya and who she is and her patience in dealing with me and everybody who she deals with or who she teaches. Sonya is a teacher. And she has learned many, many things along her journey. Things from meditations to hypnosis to NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Her teacher was Michael Stevenson of Transform Destiny. She introduced me to Clinton Swain, who is my business and public speaking teacher. She also, and she learned from him as well. She has learned breath work with Michael Brian Baker. She's also done family constellations. She learned from and was trained by many family constellations facilitators, so people like Mark Wolin, who wrote It Didn't Start With You, Stefan Hausner. She also saw Bert Hellinger in person before he passed away, which is pretty cool. He's the founder of the work. She also... Who else did she learn from? Many, many people. So that just goes to say that's a very small list about all of the things that she has learned along her journey and passed on to me. So it is a very big honor to share with you guys, my teacher here, and to pass on some of the things that she's taught to me and showed me along my journey. She was a very big and integral part of my journey and my unfolding and my involvement as well as a human and along my spiritual journey. And she was the very first person that introduced me to family constellations, which became my love and what I wanted to do. And for her, I am so grateful because she led me on that path. And I've learned lots of things along my journey. If you read the book, then you know a little bit about what led me to finding Sonya and meeting Sonya and the work I wanted to do. And so, like I said, I'm just very grateful for her because without her, I would have never probably come across it. Or maybe I would have, but it may have just been much later in life. So this Truth Seeker Society podcast is going to come periodically whenever I have a teacher or a discussion I'd like to share with you guys. So it's kind of a new format that I haven't fully given to you yet. Usually my videos are just me sitting here alone, and so I really wanted to bring in new people to kind of share other ideas. I know I've done reaction videos with people, but it's not necessarily that they're there with me having a conversation. And so I really am excited about this format and excited about sharing this part of my life with you and having new people to share their experiences with you as well. If you have anybody in mind that you'd like to see me have a conversation with, or you yourself are a teacher and would like to have a conversation with me to share with the Vibrate to Create audience, then please do reach out to me at vibratecreate@gmail.com. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation between me and my teacher, Sonya Arias. And I look forward to new teachers being introduced to you guys in the near future. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy! Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining the Vibrate to Create YouTube channel. And today is going to be our very first episode of the Truth Seeker Society podcast. And today I have Sonya Arias as our first guest. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Sonya is my teacher. So she's actually been one of the most impactful teachers I've had in my journey. And if you've read the book, you have heard some quotes of some of the things she's taught me. She was really the catalyst to helping me understand much deeper spiritual ideas that have to do more with like good versus evil, which I'd like to get into with you today, like later on in the podcast.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think throughout my journey, I've met many teachers who were all about like it's all sunshine and butterflies, and a lot of that running away from some of the deeper aspects of what it means to be human. So Sonya is very much, she brought me back down to earth. She pulled me off of my balloon.
I think, to be fair, we start like that. I remember the very beginning of my spiritual journey, and that's what it was. Everything was a sign, like the refrigerator broke. What does that mean? Like I remember going around and everything was a sign, the streets on the sign, the lights, and so it was like that, like sunshine and butterflies. And it took me a while to realize that it was based on how I wanted it to be, and not really how it was in the depth of who I am. And so I wanted very much to be like that, so I put on like this happy-go-lucky, and I believed it at the moment consciously, but on a subconscious level, on a deeper level, I had to go way deeper in order to really figure out who I was, right? And to really have a grounded, in my opinion, a more grounded concept of spirituality and humanity and life
it
itself.
Has more to do with like philosophy as well.
Right.
With like what is right and wrong, and seeing the deeper aspects of why people do things.
Yeah.
Especially when we learn about family constellations, we learn, like with Mark Wolyn's book, is it didn't start with you.
Right.
Wherever you currently are and whatever choices other people have made, this, I think, adds a whole new layer to understanding of a much larger picture than many people have never encountered.
Yes.
So yeah. So she is my teacher.
Thank you.
She taught me family constellations. She taught me Reiki, and among other things that you've learned, but I haven't gone into that with you.
Okay.
But I feel like I've definitely got little pieces of what you do through my other trainings with you.
Right.
So, yeah, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that at the beginning I started, like I took this class or this training and that other training, and I was very much in a place where I would do them in separation of each other. Like I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I think I've gotten to a point where everything is pretty much present in whatever specific modality I'm doing. Like NLP is present in family constellations. Family constellations is present in the way I teach, or in the way that I do Reiki. Reiki is present because it's part of who I am. So it was the first certification, the first class where I had a certificate and I could like go help others with. But it's present in everything that I do, and it's who I am these days. And I've seen as a result of doing the modalities, practicing them personally and with others, that they have become sort of integrated and very much part of who I am.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about how we met,
okay,
and how I ended up meeting you, which if anybody has read the books and you know kind of most of the journey, but I kind of want to recap. We were introduced by Karen, who she was the person who took me to the jungle and helped me to meet shamans and do ayahuasca and have a full-on adventure.
Right.
And definitely at that time, I was going through a lot with family, so it was almost perfect that I ended up learning about family constellations right in the moment where all the turmoil and things were happening. And I
Right.
ended up moving in with Sonya for a whole year.
Yeah,
So
she ended up being my roommate.
Yeah, I got very immersed in the work throughout that whole year and all the other stuff we were doing. Also, hearing about why you would do certain things after we did the, you know, the workshops, or also just seeing you work with people. I think I learned so much by being immersed in that.
Right.
So yeah, so I lived with you for a year.
Yeah.
Sonya's challenging. I'm challenging. Everyone's challenging.
I was going to say, Alexis is a piece of cake. I think that's human. It's one thing to interact with people, and like from far away, right? You see people a little bit here and there, and everything is wonderful. But when you are in a relationship, or when you are in a different kind of relationship, like being roommates, then that stuff that we normally don't show to others, then it's present, because we can be our perfect selves, right? But I think, so that's that. We have our highs, we have our lows, and then we have our moments, and there are good and our moments that are not so good. I think it's how we handle them, or how we talk about it, rather than just letting them be. I think that's the answer, or that is the resolution to having differences. Everybody is different.
And that's one thing I really admire about you, is your ability to stick it out even in the tough. Because I feel like I'm very much, and I'm learning, everybody is learning and growing, but I'm learning more to stay more present with the discomfort. Whereas before I even began this journey, I probably would have just left the room.
Right.
But yeah, that's something I really admire about you, is that you're okay with having tough conversations about things, and being able to confront it and face it instead of run from it.
Right. And, you know, I didn't start out with that like most people. I had my coping mechanisms, and it was like fight it to death, the hypothetical death. I fight it until the end, or brush it under the rug, you know, pretend it isn't there, or cave in and to avoid confrontation, or like run away from it, change the subject, talk about it, pretend it didn't exist. And I learned the hard way that it needs to be, yes, like the layers and the layers and the layers. They don't go away, they stay, right? And that's really, by not talking about it, by not sitting and saying, okay, this is what's going on, or like even within ourselves, like sit with ourselves and go like, oh man, I really come off this way, even though what I want to say, I still want to state it, there is a better way to say it. And then having that tough conversation after, or sitting in that discomfort, to be able to see someone's point of view and be able to say your point of view. At the end of the day, if you go high enough, you find that there's always commonality, that most people are coming from the same place, just being expressed differently.
Do you have any advice for people who they have tendencies to run from confrontation within relationships?
Well, I wish it was like that, like a little. There's yes. I think
in every instance.
Yes, it took a while. There was no magic pill for me. It took a while, but like learning about ourselves and learning that it's a coping mechanism, a reaction that we're having. We didn't start out like that way. At one point, we needed to be that way, to run away from things, to
survive,
to surrender to it, to survive, or to make peace. Or we didn't have the tools, so we went to that, and it worked, and it was a resource. It was resourceful at the time, but as we get older, like, it doesn't always stay resourceful. Sometimes it becomes a point of pain. One of the things that I always do my best, it doesn't matter what anybody's doing, what anybody's saying, what they're doing to me. I have a responsibility in it as well. I participate. Even like I tell people, even if I'm stopped at a light and somebody doesn't stop, doesn't brake, and hits me from behind, I might have not provoked it. I might have just doing the right thing, being at the red light, stopped at the red light, but my participation is, I was there in that moment. That's how I participated. Like if I'd been on the next street, right, then I wouldn't have been there. So I was present, not to blame, but I was there. Now, maybe I didn't provoke it, maybe I didn't instigate, maybe my participation was just I happened to be there at that moment. However, how I handle the situation, what I do afterwards, how I react to it, or how I move through it or stay stuck in it, that's my responsibility. Right, that's the responsibility. Even if it happened to me, my responsibility is to get unstuck from the places that I'm stuck, or where I'm in pain or discomfort. It's my responsibility. It's not anybody else's. They could change too, for sure. They have their part, and maybe they want to, maybe they don't want to. I've been asked by people to become someone I don't want to be, and then I own that. I don't, what you want from me, I'm not able to give, or I don't want to give, or it's too much to ask, right? And I have to say no, so I have a right to say no, and in the same way, other people have a right to say no, to choose.
I think also it's important to have compassion for if we handled it wrong in the specific situation.
Yeah,
too.
Yes, for sure. So that's why I said
that was the best we could do at that moment.
Right, and that's why I said, like, it's been a resource and we learned it, and it becomes almost as an instinct. We don't think about the reactions we're having before we have them. But if we're able to notice that we had them, and then we pay attention to that, and at first it's like, oh, darn it, I did it again. But the next time we catch ourselves just when we're doing it, and we can stop. And the next time perhaps we catch ourselves right before we do it, so that we can handle it a little bit different, or in a better way.
The saying that you have, consciously unconscious, or
Yeah, it's not my say. I learned it before. I learned it when I studied NLP with Michael Stevenson, but I had already heard it from LifeQuest. I had done this 7-day workshop, and then they talked about it in that way, and it stayed with me. There's stages for change. The first stage of it is where unconsciously or subconsciously incompetent. Something in our life isn't working, but we don't even know we don't even know that it isn't working, right? And then when it starts to hurt, when we start to have some discomfort, then it's the second stage. We moved into the second stage, which is we are consciously incompetent. Mm-hmm. Now we know that whatever we're doing or whatever we're immersing in is not working, and there's a certain amount of discomfort that comes with that, but we still don't seem to be able to know how to change it, or before we know it, we're already there. The third stage is we're consciously competent, and that's when it takes repetition, it takes effort, it takes a commitment. We have to stick it out. In that moment, like having that conversation, we're consciously being competent, consciously making ourselves state to have that difficult conversation, putting ourselves out there, whatever the desire is to run away, not to open up, not to be vulnerable, whatever that is. Consciously, we have to sit with that discomfort and move through it. And then the last stage is we're unconsciously competent. Later, we don't think about it. Anything that we do often and we do in repetition, eventually it becomes subconscious. We don't think about it. Like driving, right? When we first started driving, man, it was challenging. You had to do 20, 30 things before you even went, down the street. And now the most conscious thing you do, probably, or at least for me, the most conscious thing that I do, where I spend the most time probably thinking about it, is setting the GPS with the right address. After that, then I just go, don't think about, I stopped. I don't think I better stop. It's the red light. I stop without even thinking about it. I go without even thinking about it. Sometimes I'm thinking about other things, and I find myself at the place I'm supposed to be, and then wonder, like, man, how did I get here? Right. Yeah.
I kind of want to go back to the beginning where I talked about your views on what it means to be good versus evil.
Okay.
Do you think there, and this is a chapter in my book, is good versus evil. So in the book I talk about, have you ever seen the Joker movie? You've seen it, okay. So in the book I give that as an example to show, because I think that movie, although it is gory, it definitely depicts the upleading into somebody who loses their mind, basically. And all the things that led to where he wanted to connect with people and couldn't connect with people, that led him to becoming who he is.
Right.
And so, to me, that movie is it causes me to feel compassion towards the character.
Right.
Whereas in, past times when people are watching Batman and they see the Joker and they see it in a very different way.
Right.
They see the Joker as, the terrible human. And that's a big thing with, like, things like Hitler even, where people automatically just jump to the conclusion that that's a terrible person, and almost to the point where they're like he shouldn't even be alive because of what he does.
Right.
So do you have views on this? I'm like giving my views. I want to hear yours.
So I don't think anything is black and white. There's no defined, that's my opinion, there's really no defined boundaries. I would say unless there's something wrong with people, like psychologically, or something wrong with that my thought is that most people are not evil, even when they do evil things. That it's what we do that is good or evil or bad. And I think most of the times, like most, it stems, the intention isn't necessarily bad, the behavior is bad. Right. And the behavior, the things that we do. And I read somewhere, and I still believe that, like I didn't come up with it at all, that like most everything is motivated by love, either the desire to be loved or the fear of not being loved. And it pushes us to do things, or we make choices. The fear, if it is fear or desire, we make choices according to that. I consider myself a good person, and yet I've done some things at times that, like, I regret, and they weren't good things, right? I've done some things, and sometimes that's what you do. And the intention wasn't to be mean or hurtful, or I wasn't sitting there thinking I'm going to do this thing because I'm evil or anything like that. But I've done some things that hurt people, where the result was not something that I desired, right? And the action, like, it just happened at the moment, and then later I sat down when I had time, when I wasn't being reactive. I had time to sit down and recognize that I messed up, right? That's not truly who I am. That it was a reaction, right? Yeah.
So you think, your view is basically there is no such thing as black and white. Is it this
There's
is
no
all
black
good,
and
all
white.
bad?
I think some
and
really,
that's
really good people do some shitty thing.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay.
I think maybe we can.
Some like good people do not so good things, and some what we consider bad people are able to do some good things.
Yeah,
and so it's not so black and white. There's so many. Go ahead.
That chapter isn't just about people doing good or bad things, but in general, good versus bad. So when we're talking about being famous, there are good things and there are bad things that come from it.
Right.
So it's a very wide
Right.
idea that doesn't just have to do with people doing things, but
Right.
the nature of everything is that there is good and bad to all things, I think.
I think that if you really sit down and look at it, you can find the opposite within anything that we believe to be true.
Like we talk about the perpetrator energy,
Right.
right? And some people would automatically say that's bad, which I think I began with
Right.
when I first started doing family constellations.
Right. Right. We look at like the perpetrator and the victim energy, and if we take away the label or something, then like if we make a choice, sometimes we start by making a choice. I would rather be on the victim side because I don't want to hurt other people. I don't want to have the perpetrator energy within me if we just put it in energy. I don't want to be the perpetrator. I'd rather be the victim. If we had a choice, right, in the matter, if we're given no other choice per se. And but there are some things like they're being in the victim energy, being the victim, there's good and not so good in it. Like, you know, some good things that, and it depends on everybody's perspective. Because when I look at the victim, then I can look at the good that comes from it. You learn to be compassionate. You learn to understand people. You learn to understand pain. So it helps you not inflict pain on others. But what's not so good about it is that, damn, it keeps happening to you.
And you're hurting yourself, basically.
Right, and yes, and then, and sometimes like we even victimize ourselves, right? We're so used to that. And now, on the other hand, if we could make a conscious choice, most of us, we didn't start with the conscious choice. We were too young to understand, or, you know, we didn't have the ability to see it for what it was until later. And so let's say we were the bully at school, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not good to bully others, for sure. But inherently in that is there's some good things that you can see from it, for sure. Then you can take care of yourself. If somebody's coming at you, you have the energy to fight that back, right? And so you can utilize that. The thing of it is like when you're able to become conscious of it, when you're able to harness it, then you use that strength, right?
Because
that force with volition.
I think I've heard you say that if you don't harness it or take hold of it, then it comes out in other ways.
Yeah, most of the times too, like I kind of look at, like when we look at polarities, if we're looking at this, like victim, perpetrator energy, up, down, good, bad, however it is, right? There's a polarity, like if one exists, there's a universal law of polarity. If this exists, then the opposite exists as well. The opposite of it exists, right? And so then my perspective too, if we go to victim and perpetrator energy, life has a way of bringing things like to you in this way. So if we're not balanced within our polarity of victim perpetrator energy internally, then we're going to attract it externally, right? And perhaps that's a mirror for us to learn to be a little bit more in our strength without going overboard, right? It's people that don't harness their power that can hurt others. And it's people, also a victim doesn't harness their power, then they can be victimized, right? And so when we learn to harness, and when we've been on the victim side, sometimes we have that anger or whatever that comes out, and then we can flip the coin to the perpetrator energy, and we usually become the perpetrator energy with the people who, or not just the people, but animals, or in the situations, in the most inopportune times, or also we take it out on the people who are the safest to us, which is usually the ones who love you, the ones who love us the most, or the ones that are more defenseless than us, right? And then it comes out, and it comes out. It's the flip side of the coin, right?
And this has a lot to do with family constellations, what we're sharing.
Well, it's a concept I learned. I wouldn't say it's specific to family constellations, but it is something that I learned in family constellations, to look at like things in a way that, like, if we really look at it, everything is good and not so good, and everything is bad. It's also good at times, depending on the situation. It's circumstantial. Because if you're looking at perpetrator energy, if somebody's coming at you with a hatchet, then you want that perpetrator energy, right? Or they're coming to hurt your children, rest assured that you want to be the one swinging the bat, right?
But I meant more in the case of the family system, and that sometimes it gets passed on because the perpetrator was excluded within the family system.
So the essence of family constellation is that which hasn't been processed in a family system, a traumatic event, something happened, and it wasn't able to be processed, stays in the nervous system, therefore it gets passed down from one generation to another. That is a concept. Or also we can look at it as like subconsciously we are still vibrating to that frequency, so we have sort of a impulse to do the same, like if there's an event, there's this in this part of the event, to choose to be like one of the other. Mostly, and that's one, Bert Hellinger is the founder of the work. One of the things he talked about is there's a greater soul, or of a greater energetic field per se, that's bigger than our own personal one, that involves the whole family, and it doesn't necessarily allow us to exclude. Whenever we're excluding someone in the family system, then we tend to include them in a subconscious way, right, out of love, right? And so the concept of the polarity systems first, I was able to understand when I did my training in family constellations, the inclusion of everything. If you include your perpetrator energy, then it becomes your ally. It's also referred to by spiritual people as the shadow, embracing your shadows, right? Those things that we're rejecting. Right, so I would say it's not a concept that's exclusive to family constellations, but that's what I learned at first. Right.
So can you talk a little bit about family constellations? This is your favorite modality?
It's one. There's two techniques that I do, and this is one of my favorite ones, because I'm able to see how the shift in people, the release of the pent-up energy, their bodies relax into something different and new, into a new way of being. So family constellations, why we do family constellations is to help somebody. Somebody has an issue. We look at like where the issue comes from most of the time. So a lot of the times, not always, but I say often, the issue, whatever we're doing right now, is sort of a hiccup, or a continuous movement from generations back, right? Sometimes it's easy to see, like, somebody being in a gang member, because, and then their parent was, and then the parent before, so you can see how it's been the same thing, right? Sometimes it's not so clear to see, or it doesn't make so much sense, but the way it is. So the premise is, it starts with an event, a traumatic event, something that happened where the people who were involved in that, our ancestors, weren't able to move through and beyond the trauma of it. And so it stays in the nervous system and moves forward. And as it moves forward, we keep reenacting that event. The details are different, but the essence is sort of the same, right? Like I said, sometimes it's easier to see, sometimes it's not. Like, for instance, in my family system, when I did a constellation, and we start with an issue, and then there is an interpretation that moves beyond that and goes back in family constellations. I can't remember how I set up for the issue, but what showed up in what we call the morphogenic field was somebody losing a child. And from that child, it had to do with relationships. There was a mistrust or not trusting the partner, not trusting the males in the family system. And for me, that was the case, right? I didn't trust them fully. I couldn't like really surrender in a good way in a relationship. And so it went back there. So I knew that my parents lost a child before I was born, because it showed like it was a mother and a father looking at a dead child. So I knew my parents lost a child. What I didn't, I knew my grandmother on my mom's side, she also lost a child. Well, my grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side, they lost a child. But what I didn't know is that it also happened on my dad's side of the family. And that went that way. Somebody had died. And so I didn't have the details, but it showed up. I didn't have the details. And there were two things. The loss of a child, the grief of losing a child, but also that sort of resentment and that rejection towards the male, right, that was present. And fast forward, I asked my mom. My dad wouldn't tell us a lot of details of his life. My dad was pretty quiet, but my mom knew a lot. So I asked my mom, just some questions, because what I did and what I do, like, it's kind of weird to some members of my family. I don't share as much. I would say they are open or they're supportive, but they don't have all the details, especially back when I first started. But anyway, so I didn't go and ask my mom specifically, but I asked a couple of questions. I asked, like, did anybody lose a child? And then she's like, well, we did. And I said, well, what about on my dad's side of the family? So she talked about my grandmother and my grandfather, like when their third son, my grandmother got sick and she was gravely ill. And she had a baby. My mom couldn't remember if it was a baby, 3-4 months or what happened. And they were in a very remote, secluded area in Mexico where they lived. And so she was so sick that at that point, however it was, the priest showed up to give the last rites. And then she had a baby, and they weren't breastfeeding the baby because she was sick. They weren't sure what was wrong. So what happened because of that was that the baby wasn't being fed, wasn't being nourished. He was too young to be able to feed him regular food. So whatever it was back in the day, it wasn't enough. My grandmother survived, ended up not dying, but they really thought she was on a deathbed. And so she survived, but the baby didn't survive. And then from that, I could just imagine, right? Because, my grandmother had died at the time, and I couldn't talk to them, but what showed up, I could just imagine what showed up in the system was the blaming the male. And I could just imagine, how do you get over that? The loss of a baby. Right, how do you get over that, and how do you process those things? And here's your partner who's supposed to be taking care of the baby, and it's not their fault, but I could assume, I can understand if there are some emotions of blame that come from that, right? And so I didn't have children then, and I don't have any children now, so I didn't experience the loss of a child, but I could experience the grief sometimes of that, right? And so there is a sort of dominoes effect or chain reaction that happens. So my parents lost a baby, and my mom would talk about that. It was way before I was born, and they took him. He got sick. They took him to the hospital, and he didn't make it. And my mom said that, like, when they got home, that probably he got stung by a scorpion, because there was a scorpion on the bed, but they don't know, right? They don't know, right around the same age. And then, when we look at, and it was the third child, when we look at however it's manifesting, my sister also lost a baby, her third child.
So the point is, you're saying it's reverberated and it's very evident. Once you started learning about this,
right,
you were able to see the trend, and where none of your family really pieced it together that they were doing the same thing.
I don't know that I sat with my family and explained it to them in that way, that would be able to see it, right? There's that dynamic, we call that in family constellations, we call those dynamics. There's also the dynamic in my family system of the firstborn being raised by the grandmother, right? And that goes back like to my great grandmother, right? And then my grandma had 2 children, lost one, and so then she came to the United States, and my mom stayed with my grandmother, my great grandmother, right? And then my mom had a child, and my grandmother raised her, right? And then that's my sister, right? That one particular sister, her daughter had a son, and she partially raised them, right? And my other sister had a son, like firstborn was a daughter, and then my mother, my mom and my dad raised her when she was a toddler, a child, because she came to the United States to find a better way of living with her husband, and then sent for her. But she was partially, she was raised by my parents for a short amount of time. But you see that happening. Then my niece had a son, and then my sister raised them to a certain age, kind of like the grandmother stepping in. And so it can sort of move in the system that way. And it's subconscious. We don't sit there and we go, oh, I'm going to do this. It just seems like life happens that way. And we're helpless to that until we know better and we can change it.
So how have you seen family constellations change the lives of the people that you've worked with? Because you've been doing this for, and you said 16?
16 years. So
have you seen big effects from the work that you're doing?
Yes, a lot of the times. Like, when I first took my trainings, one of my teachers said, like, we trust that their soul, their subconscious mind, that the people are capable of continuing with the changes. It's a little bit different than therapy, or a little different of the other modalities where you pick up and you have a follow-up call with family constellations. At least with that particular teacher, he instigated on us to let the work sit and not call, so that it's not a doubt of like if it's working or not. Trust that it is. So there were a lot of people that or most people I don't follow up and check. I'm learning to now, or if once they come back, they do one session, they come back. So in family constellation, we look at like whatever is excluded. And whatever was excluded, it's probably in that moment with the act, because it's not looked at. Sometimes we can, so we just don't see it, even if we know it. There's no full acceptance that it happened. I would never say that you should accept that there violent crimes should happen. That's not what I'm saying. Is the acceptance of this happen. Like, how can a child, 12, 13, how do we fully accept those things? Sometimes we don't. It's difficult. The death of a child, sometimes even like the break up of relationships, a parent dying, us growing up in foster care, like all those things. There's no full acceptance, because a lot of the times it happens when we're so young. We're not able to, right? We're not able to, so there's no fully accepting of that, the fully tapping into the emotions. They need to be felt, right? When we feel the emotions, then the energy moves. That's the healing itself. We don't heal the issue or whatever happened. It's like those emotions that weren't processed, they weren't expressed, they weren't felt. Because in that moment, like, preservation says, I'm going to look somewhere else. I'm going to put it away. That's how brilliant we are. I'm going to put it away because if I look at it right now, I may not get off the floor, right? My life may not continue. So we put it away until, and that's how the subconscious mind works. We put it away until we have the tools. But sometimes when we're older, it keeps coming up for us to move through it. And we have the tools, but we don't know how to do it. So we still shove it back. We don't fully accept it. And so the healing comes from that, acknowledging what is. And in family constellations, it can be one-on-one, so the client can feel the emotions, or the facilitators sometimes help. In a group, people, it's amazing work utilizing what we call the morphogenic field. People step in to participate, to represent the people involved in the event, and something moves through them that allows for that. It's as if in that moment there's no separation in time and in space, and from one person to the next. So the emotions move through them, they're able to release them, and then there's a peace that comes. And then that, in a way, allows the person, the client, to be liberated and to have different choices, to make different choices, and to leave that where it really belongs, right?
Do you feel like, we don't have to add this in, but I'm just curious now that we're talking. So the thing I'm curious about is, do you feel like because of all the things that you've seen that it affects you?
What do you mean?
Because this is a really tough experience, and also you've worked with people who have had many tough experiences, me included. And I'm wondering if it has affected you in any way, or do you think it helps you understand people and the nature of reality on a deeper level?
I think that a lot of what happened to me, whatever I've experienced, then it allows me to understand, to be able to sit there if I've moved through my own stuff, and to hold the space for somebody else to do it. Does that make sense? Because I think that when somebody's processing that stuff, when I'm able to see it, I'm not crying because I feel sorry for them. I'm not crying because I feel compassion for them. I'm usually able to hold the space and not look at it as
Take it in.
Not take it in, and also not look at it as good or bad, but as something that is, right? And in that moment, when I can hold that space, then the clients can look at it also in that way, right? Because mostly we think, oh, this was horrible. This was horrible, and that ass, whatever, and that person, that, and we have that rejection. And we don't look at what that created inside of us or inside of the people, which is what we carry, what's inside, those unexpressed emotions. And we don't even have a clue. So when I'm able to hold that space, right, I don't look at it as, in that moment, if I'm connected, then it's not personal to anyone. I'm able to look at it, hold that space, so they can see it like that, without that involvement, right, without giving it a meaning, and allow really for the feelings to be felt and expressed and released.
And that's what I tell people too, is that there's many things I could do. There are many things I could teach and different routes I could go, but that this one felt like the right one because it's the only space I've encountered where it was like, it creates an opening for someone to fully dive into themselves,
Right.
and to feel things that nobody has allowed them to hold the space to feel.
And it is such a tender and sacred moment that is also so beautiful. Right.
Yeah.
So there's an opening of the heart that happens, right? For the client, for themselves, for their ancestors, right?
And for everyone who's
watching, for everybody, there's an opening of the heart. And now we know, Joe Dispenza says, when the heart is open, the body can start to heal. When I do family constellations, I started with family constellations. Now I'm able to do it more often, not always, but more often than not, to sit in that place where I feel like there is this, I think it's part of it's part of the answer to your question. There is this divine invisible force, right? It goes by many names: God, this Holy Spirit, the universe, divine source, like, you know. So there's something that happens, and that particular modality is where I first became aware of it. Where I sat there, there is something that moves through that's greater than me and my humanness, greater with that. If that there is, like, if we're made of the of the image of God, that tiny little particle that it is, the God particle within me, allows for the full particle to come in, or something different, and I'm moved by that. Therefore, there's no judgment, right? There's no, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's just neutral, and I'm able to hold that space. And to answer your question, does that affect me? In the moment we're moved, everybody's moved by it. If I'm coming from the place, I believe that it doesn't affect me because I'm not in my humanness. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like if I get there and I start to feel sorry for the client or their system, or horrified by some of the things, there's some atrocities that have happened, right? That we've been part of on the receiving end, on the giving end, or in our family lineage. There's so much that happens in the name of whatever, right? In the name of whatever, in the name of war, in the name of balance, like whatever that is. And so I think that, like, when I'm sitting in that place, it moves me, and therefore, like, it doesn't stick. Mm-hmm. Right?
I'm wondering, because I'm thinking about the people who are watching. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like, or do you have advice that you could give to someone who is going through something really tough right now?
Wow, there's like so much that could be. I think everybody's okay. So I think everybody's
here. So
okay.
What if I ask you, what do you think the meaning of life is? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who aren't. Maybe they feel like they don't have meaning in life, or that life doesn't have meaning to it.
Right.
That's a specific kind of problem, because I asked kind of like a very general question earlier.
It's, and like, okay, so I sometimes I'm able to sit in that space where I understand all of it, the purpose of life, the meaning of life, like all of it. And then sometimes I'm very human, and I go like, oh, this is not, like, whatever that is. I want more, I want bigger, I want less, I want whatever that is. And then so life is not precious in that moment, because I'm experiencing my personality, my ego, my humanness, right? And so when I'm sitting on the other place with an open heart, then life, it doesn't matter. It could be the same as yesterday. Yesterday I could have been crying because I didn't have enough whatever I wanted, right? And then today it could be, life can be exactly the same in the meaning of it. If I have an open heart, if I feel connected to life itself, to other people, to the animals, to nature, if I feel connected, that I know the grander meaning of that is love and like connection, is the love that is everywhere, but we're able to feel only if our heart is open. Right? Right. There's a purpose. I think we all come here. If we're lucky, we get to, and we get to get glimpses that it's bigger than us as a human being, right? And it's not easy. It seems treacherous at times. Like we have to release so much that we're attached to, in our wants, desires, needs, perceptions, right? So like I felt the what people call the calling. I felt the calling when I was younger, but I didn't pay attention. And then, like, darkest night of the soul in my 30s is really when I needed, when in the void, that emptiness I had was so big, I felt like I was going to drown in it. So when I started seeking for something greater, and then but I realized, like, at one point, I look back and I've always been moved by this desire to help others, right? This desire to connect. My personal desire is to connect with an open heart to everyone, right? Mm-hmm. And the desire to help others is that so that we can liberate all those perceptions we have, all those, the meanings what we've given to whatever didn't go our way, right? And so and I've been seeking right? I've done a lot of stuff to heal everything and all my issues and my traumas, and
we're still
I've
doing
gone,
it.
yes, and I've gone to
10 years
Peru, and I've sat with ayahuasca, shamburi, and all kinds of medicines to in the pursuit of the meaning of life, right? And then, like, look, I've done it, and it's been so helpful, and I still can do it, and I go there, and but also, like, when you're in the meaning of life, nothing is good and nothing's bad. It's just precious the way it is, and we're able to see it. You know, I times for the longest time when people told me that, I'd be like, what the hell are they on, right? Mm-hmm. I'd be like, whatever. Or I'd like think that they were faking it, or maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know. But I found meaning in just like sitting there, looking out the window, having a cup of coffee, and life is precious in the moment, right? And it comes when the heart is open, and when you're grateful. Right? I think that as long as I'm wanting for someone or something, or if I'm coming from a place like somebody owes me, life should be better to me, or this person should be better and I should be treated, when it comes from that place, then I'm not able to feel that. Right? But when I'm not saying I want to, but when I'm there, I'm sitting on the table having a cup of coffee, and everything is perfect. And I still had like whatever, the bills to pay, and I still have the responsibilities and all of that. But in that moment, then I had that if I died right now, I'd be okay. Like I completed life. And then I've also been at a point where like, oh my God, especially when I turned 50, I was like, man, I'm nowhere near that I was going to be. Like all the things, like I saw myself being this way and having this. And I sat there for a minute, I looked, and I'm like, man, I'm still, like none of that is here, right? And there was that sadness for a minute there. Like I felt like, oh, I haven't accomplished anything, right? And I went there, right? But I can easily get out of that as well, right? Yeah. And I have, like, talking about, like, you know, gone to Peru, I don't know how many times, and done the ayahuasca trips and stuff. And last time I sat with medicine was Shamburi, and it was beautiful, right? So I'm like craving the same experience. So I go over there, I do the medicine, and I'm waiting for the sky to open up and all the visions and all the feelings. And then I hear the medicine say, go home and sit with the mundane. Right. Yeah. That's it. That's the most profound experience. Right? That was the most profound experience. Right? And like here I go and I sit there, and I'd already seen, you know, the animal kingdom come to me and all the visions and all the feelings and this and that. In that moment, she just says that. Go home and sit with the mundane. That's it. But that's really the meaning of life, to sit there with life as it is and to accept it just as it is, exactly as it is. When you come from that place, then from that place you can create much more. Yeah.
In the book, I talk about this one story that I've heard about, because it reminded me so much of my journey, which was the seeking and the looking for what is the truth. And basically the story is of this woman. I think I read it in the book. It was a book by Osho, and he talks about this woman who she's going and she's looking for a pin or a needle or something, and so she's looking inside the house for the pin, and then she's looking out on the street, and then so some people are walking by and they're like, what are you looking for? What can I help you find it? And she's like, yeah, I lost this needle and I'm looking for it. And then they're all like searching and looking, and then they ask her, when was the last time you saw it? And she said, in the house. And then or that she dropped it in the house, and so like basically she's looking outside for something. Well, it's really inside the house that she should be looking for it. So that's one story, but the other story that I share in the book is about I feel like I was going on a long journey, looking for a bunch of, like, looking under many rocks, looking for, is the truth here, is the truth here? But the point that I was missing when I was going on that journey was, it wasn't to get the truth. What it was all the conversations I was having with people.
Right.
It was the going to the jungle.
Right.
And all the experiences I got to have meeting people from different cultures
Right.
and learning from them.
Right.
And the beautiful things I got to see, like even just on this last trip to Alaska.
Right.
Like, to me, that's meaning.
Right.
Is just living in the particular one moment where you are, wherever you're at, just
Right.
being.
And I think maybe my perception, collectively, there's a sense of dissatisfaction that's so big that we want more and more and more, and we were looking for this significance, and we kind of miss it.
Or when
We
you,
kind
sometimes
of
when people
miss
get
it.
there, they're like, oh, I thought this was going to be the end goal of everything I ever wanted, and I want something different.
My friend Amir told me a story once, and at that moment, like, it moved me, because I remember, and I'm probably not gonna say it as good as he did. It got me, but I couldn't understand it, but it got me in some way. So he tells the story about this prophet or this teacher is walking alongside the bank of a river, and it's cold, and he's given up all of the possessions, and he's talking to the students, and they're walking right there, and he had no coat, and it's cold, and all of a sudden they see this fur coat floating down the river, and the students are like, teacher, teacher. And so he's like, oh, I'm gonna get God has sent me a coat. So he jumps in the river, right? And he swims to the coat, and he tries to grab the coat. And then the students are looking at him, and he's like going in and out, and he's like entangled in this coat. And they're like, teacher, teacher, let it go, you're gonna drown, like, let it go. And then he yells, I let it go, but it won't let me go. And then he's like, oh, it was a bear, right? But I didn't understand it until, like, even the other day, like maybe 6 months ago, I asked him to tell me the story again, because I remember when he told me, I couldn't get it, but I knew it was profound. Well, the other day I was like, the things that we seek, right? And we want it so badly, and we go, and then when we have it, right, to me, it was like, then we have it. We're here. We're doing this thing. And then we want something else. But then we feel like we're stuck. It won't let me go. We have a tendency to say, like, life is happening to me. And life is happening to me. This person's happening to me. They're like, and in that way, we give up our own power, our own ability to create, right? So I had that, like, oh, okay, so in life, that's what we do. I want the house. I want the ability to go hike Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest. I want to accomplish so much. And we get so caught up in that it becomes our bear. Mm-hmm. Right? That it becomes our bear. Right? We look for significance. We look for... right, and we want to be bigger and better, at least in my perception. Like I saw it with medicine, right? And then there have been some profound things that happened, which I was disappointed at that time, but then later I was able to see it, and it's so funny because we think like divinity, or if I'm able to, whatever that is, then it makes me a better person, right? And so I'm sitting with medicine.
To reach a God,
right? Yes.
That'd be perfect.
So
perfect, like Jesus.
Right. I tell you the story precisely about Jesus. So I took medicine San Pedro, and Wachuma medicine, and I'm sitting in my process, and there was so much grief that was moving through it, and I'm like crying the whole night, crying, and it was from the depth. Like I felt like it really was. It wasn't to a particular thing. I didn't have a memory, this happened, that's why I'm crying. But it was that kind of cry that feels so good to cry because you need it to let it out. So the whole night I'm crying. Not that else, I'm just crying, I'm releasing. And then I felt like I have my little mattress, and then I felt someone sit next to me. And in that moment I felt the essence of Jesus. Right? I didn't open my eyes to see, oh, it's Jesus. But in that moment I felt so special. Right? I felt so special and so humble. And then I'm crying because like I'm crying with this humbleness, right? And then I'm like, oh, like why me, Jesus? Like why me? I'm being humble, that why am I so special that you sit with me, but pretending. That moment I was not feeling like I was pretending, but I'm like, why me? And I'm crying because like I'm a little no one, nobody, and you sit with me, right? And so I'm crying because I feel so overwhelmed that Jesus chose me. And so I'm asking, why me? What's so important about me, right? And then Jesus says, I sit with everyone.
That doesn't mean you're less special. It means everybody's special.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And then I'm sitting there thinking I'm like, I'm so special, but being humble about it. Why me? Right. And the thing isn't like if it's you or if it's this other person or how many ayahuasca trips you've done, right? And how many students you've taught or how much you have done. Like anyone, someone who's never done anything, who's never taken medicine, who's never like gone the hard journey,
Done a
right?
spiritual.
All they have to do is be open, right? And it was that he was sitting there was not really humbling. That he said, I sit with everyone. That was the humbling experience, right? Right. I can laugh about it, but at first I was like, right? Because I'm thinking, oh, why me? I'm just a little old me. But in that moment, like, what I wanted to hear is because you're special, right? Like maybe not consciously, but underneath that, that's really what the ego was seeking for, significance. Right?
It's very conflicting because, well, what I'm talking more is about because in career, like I don't want to sit and live in my car for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? There are things that I'd love to, and I feel like doing it consciously is one thing, and not doing it so that you get to the end goal, but doing it so that you can create something that you love and that you can share with other people.
Right.
To make the world a different place because your existence happened at this time. Does that make sense? And I think that's very different than doing it to get to the end.
Now I think
so that's what I mean is it's conflicting because I've heard other people who, when I share, like I had this reading with someone at the store that I worked at, and he mentioned, and it was something, so there's this movie and it's called, what is it about? Something Jesus, and it talks about this guy's journey who basically like it shares his spiritual life. So when I went to go watch this movie at the theater, I was thinking this is something I would love to do to inspire people through a storytelling of a movie. So I had this reading, and without knowing anything about me, he says, I feel like you're going to make a movie someday to share what your life has been like, or to inspire people through like a movie basically. So I shared this with somebody, and their response was something like, when I was younger, I wanted to be famous. Like they took it as, I'm doing it because I want to be famous. Where in my mind, it was like, I want to do this so that I leave something behind that is of substance. And that's also why I started my YouTube channel, is to leave a portion of me behind even when I'm not here, that can help to affect other people when I'm not here as well. And so just hearing people's responses to that was like, you shouldn't want to create in your career because you should be happy with where you are now and just being. But I'm like, I have ambitions and drive too. What do you think
what
of
I'm
that?
saying, okay, so I'm not saying that people shouldn't have ambition and drive and all of that. What I'm maybe what I'm understanding in life now is that we kind of go at it, or at least I've been going at it reversed. Right. That I've been going at it in a reversed way, that I'm like, I want to do this and I want to have this, and if I'm not having that, I'm dissatisfied and unhappy, and I create a pain points in my body, in my life, in my relationships, because like, man, for the longest time there was this huge amount of dissatisfaction in my life, and that was kind of what drove me. And then I'm like taking NLP classes and doing all of that because I'm seeking to penetrate this, to end this way that I felt, right? And it had a meaning, right? And the reality is I could go get those things, but that would be my bear, right? That it's still, if I am not being happy in the place that I'm in, like I want to go get that stuff so that I can be happy. What if I can be happy? Yes. What if I can be happy right here, right now? And because I'm happy right here and right now, then the choices that I want, the desires that I want, are motivated by a different kind of drive, push. Right? Does that make sense? And so I think we go at it the wrong way. We go looking for, or at least I do. I went looking for all the things out here that were going to make my life better. But when I sit with who I am and I accept the places where I'm not happy with, and in the acceptance, there's movement. Either I'm going to be okay with it, or it opens up so that I can go. Another way that I can say it, if I'm not accepting, if what I want to be, like as a metaphor, I want to be in New York, right? But if I'm not accepting that I'm in Compton, because I don't want to be in Compton, right? That's the last place I want to be. If that's my life, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. If I don't have acceptance of where I am, how in the heck am I going to get to New York? If I'm pretending to be in San Francisco, or if I'm pretending, but I'm not there. I'm right here, right? I'm right here in this moment. So when I have acceptance as that, not as bad or good or better, right? I'm just right here. I'm right here thinking I'm still 5'2" when I'm really 5'1", right? Thinking that whatever that is, right? Thinking that I'm better at this, I'm better than that, I'm more than this or something. I can feel it, and I've said that I don't know how many times. I can feel something's changing. I can feel it because I'm not wanting to feel that I'm in that space, in that place of pain or chaos or restlessness or unacceptance, right? And so it's kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky, and it has to do not necessarily where we are, but the judgment we have about the things that we're presuming we're not, or that we think are better than where we are, right? Does that make sense? So, but I wish I could tell you I have it all figured out. Because one moment I do, and the next moment I'm like back to wishing for something, wishing to be somewhere else. I have to remind myself to stay here, to really look, not to judge, and not as a place of like, oh, I'm right here, poor me. Just to say, you know what? I'm in Compton. I'm going to get to Lake first before I can get to San Francisco. And then maybe from San Francisco, I'll get to Chicago and then to New York or something. But I can get to where I want to be if I'm not accepting, consciously knowing exactly where I am. I think that's the biggest challenge. That's where the work is. Once we figure out where we are and what we have, then we know what to do in order to get where we want to get. And once we're okay, that's the thing. I think that it becomes more significant when we're motivated not by not wanting to be here, not wanting to do this, not wanting to be this. Right? If we're coming from that place, if we're seeking to fulfill on the outside. But if we're like right here and we sit with it, and then we hear that choir voice, in that place where we're more, it comes from connection, right? It comes from not the personality, right? Personality is made of strategies, coping mechanisms, right? The essence of who we are is beyond the personality, right? So when I can sit right there, then I can hear that. And from that place, then I can move forward to where I really want to be. Right? So that's when the story. But again, when he told it, and he told it to me probably good 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And he told the story, and there was something about it. But for my life, I didn't know what it meant. I'm like, I don't know, but I remember it. And in that moment, it felt profound, because at a subconscious level, I got something, right? And then not too long ago, we were doing ceremony together, and I asked him, tell me the story again, and he told it. And I was like, oh, I still didn't get it, right?
But now you get it? You got it outside of
Yeah.
when you were thinking of it?
Mm-hmm. God, sometimes, like, you know, we want a coat, and then it's a bear. And then we're like, it won't let me go. It won't let me go. It won't let me go. I want to be over there, but it won't let me go. Right?
It was the thing I wanted so badly.
Yep.
So we haven't talked about exactly what you do and why you do it. I'd love to kind of just hear very briefly.
I think when I started, I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people because, like the typical story of the wounded healer, you want to help someone because you're hurting, and you want to do for others what you wish somebody done for you, right? And it started that way. Like, I was in pain and I seeked some help, and I saw what that did for me. So then I was like, I want to do this. And then I found my own way. You know, I was going through a divorce. So I started my spiritual journey. I was going through a divorce, and I wanted a divorce, and I didn't want the divorce. I wanted the divorce. I was unhappy. I would cry. I was unhappy. But I was breaking up with someone that I loved, because I still loved him at the time. It was breaking up marriage, a way of being, a cultural thing. Like, couldn't see myself doing something different yet. And there was a pull inside me that was pulling me in a different direction. So I was in a lot of pain, and I was confused. I wanted the divorce so I could do different things. Mainly, I wanted divorce because I was in pain. Consciously, that's what I knew. But I also didn't want a divorce. I wanted him to change. I wanted my life to change. I wanted the exterior to change, but I didn't want to do whatever it took to change, right? And so I did this 7-day workshop, and in the workshop they did meditation. They did many things, but I remember, like, the meditation part when my mind was finally quiet. That's how I started. I seeked to places where I could learn to meditate. And I saw also all the benefits and how happy, and it's like I let this big old weight off my shoulder. It gave me shoulder. So I was happy and excited, and I saw how much it helped me, so I wanted to help others. I wanted to do that. And I ended up finding a roundabout way to do the same for people. So I started helping people. I think that was the desire. I think now, rather than helping people, it's like who I am. Like, I just cannot see myself doing anything else. I don't know if that makes sense. It's an extension of who I am. Like, it doesn't feel like hard work, right? Like, it feels like, okay, my arm just knows how to do this, and then I don't think about it, and I'm already doing something that my arm knows how to do. It's like part of who I am. So I can't say that I'm still like, I want to help people. I just cannot not help anymore. I don't know if that makes sense. And yet, I think that if at a soul level, there's some change that could happen, and now it says, like, you're gonna go bathe dogs for the rest of your life, then I probably would put up a fight at first, but then I would accept it, and I'd go that way, because it also give me some joy. Right? It makes me happy to do it. When I see somebody's face, when I see someone's changed, when I see somebody let go of something, they've been carrying it forever, and they let it go, and they cry, and they look different, and they stand differently, that feeds my soul. That feeds that other part of me that is deeper than the emotional satisfaction or my head. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason it moves me is because I understand that. Like I get that for myself when I do it for people.
Yeah. And I guess it's part of our nature, like nothing grows for itself. Everything in life is there, like the animals, the water, the sky, the
Like the
sea.
ants know how to do what they do.
Right.
And they just do it.
And they just do it, and they don't just do it like whatever they do. The bees, they know what to do, and they don't just do it for themselves. They do it, yes, to survive, but there's also there's I don't know if it's duty. They participate for the world to be better, and so I think that all of us have that innately ingrained somewhere. I maybe call it a soul print, right? I don't think it comes from the DNA. I think it comes from something deeper than that. Maybe even deeper than the soul, spirit, that part of us that it's spirit. That invisible force that makes everything work and come together.
So what do you do?
I facilitate change. Okay, so essentially is like I hold the space so that something greater moves so that people can get relief from their pain, suffering, stuckness. Right? I do different modalities. There's family constellations. We talked about it. Also do energy work. Right, Reiki, it's based in Reiki, but there's more than Reiki. Is like aligning chakras, doing some of that, like people lay on the table, moving some energy around. I do breath work, pranayama breath work that can help people. It's also really beautiful and deep work, can help people release some trauma from align themselves, get harmony within themselves. I do life coaching, utilize NLP and hypnosis for people that are on a more conscious way. They want to move in a certain direction in life to help facilitate that, to see what's getting in the way. I think everything comes down to energy. Whatever we have in life at the moment, we energetically vibrate that frequency. If we want something different, we have to become that person first in order to get that, in order to vibrate the frequency that's going to bring it into our lives.
You think that's why people say if you want to be like a certain person or have what a certain person has, to hang around people like that who are already there?
Right. I think like
it lines your frequencies up.
Well, I think you start to become that. Like just hanging out with them, like hoping that it happens or pretending that's not, because the energy doesn't, you can't pretend energy, right? You can pretend to be someone else, but your energy is not going to pretend that. Your energy is going to vibrate the exact frequency that you are. But when you are being, I don't know what happens, you start being a certain way, you start being that person, your environment changes. Whether it's like you change the environment first or you go in there changed, and therefore whatever's in your life that doesn't vibrate to that frequency, create space for that which is vibrating to that frequency to enter. Does that make sense? Right. And sometimes we have to become the person we want to be. In order to have what we want, we have to become the person who has those things. Right? And so in one modality or another, or all of it as a combination, then I can provide the tools and the things that you can do as a person, because I can't change you. You're the only one. But I can guide you, I can help and guide you and give you the tools and move you through certain processes to shift the energy. But you must continue with that. Right? I can put you on I can help put you on the right track, but you must continue on that track. Right? If you're like, okay, everything's changed, and you go back to the other way, but nothing's gonna change.
So we ran out of battery for my camera, so we're just going to go ahead and close up here on my phone instead. So just as a last kind of question, I guess, do you have anything that you'd like to share to someone who's watching? Or some kind of advice or something you'd like to give to the audience?
I think we have many layers. And we keep these layers for protection, and not just for others, for ourselves. One of the things that started to get me towards the deeper layers was to ask this question: what's the intention, for what purpose? I learned that in NLP, so then I would ask, like, no matter what I wanted to do, because I learned this to ask my clients when people come, or even when I want to do this, right? I want to do this. And then it's like, for what purpose? For what intention? What's the intention? For what purpose? What purpose? I'd say this, and here's the thing: when you ask yourself for what purpose, and you're clearly aware of the purpose, and you still want to do it coming from that place, then that's authentic, even if it isn't like altruistic, right? Because if we pretend so much, not just to others, but to ourselves sometimes, a lot of the times. So, like, for instance, like, when I was in the jungle, there was this lady there, and then she talked to us, and she had a drum, and she's like, would you like to meet your animal, your power animal, and your power guide, or I forget what it was. So we said yes, and she had the drum, and we went over to the one place where we could do it, and she explained to us, like, first you're going to go down in lower levels, and the drum's going to take you there, and then you're going to build a garden, and you can put, like, whatever. So she told us what to do. You can add whatever you want to your garden, and then after that, you're going to call your guides for protection, and then after that, you're going to call your animal. Your power animal. So she's doing the drum, and I'm like really going deep into it, and then I'm bringing myself back out so I can remember to not just go so deep that I forget to build my garden. So I'm like building my garden, and she's just doing the drum. So in that moment, I went into my ego, and then I'm like, oh, when I go home, I could do this for others, right? So I'm building my garden, and I'm having a conversation with myself. Like, I can do this. Like, I can add this tool to all the stack of tools I have. And so I'm like, she's drumming, and I'm like going in and putting fountains in a creek and the trees and whatever, the butterflies, whatever in my garden. And I'm thinking, I could do this. And because I know hypnosis, then I can walk people through it. I could do a guided meditation so that people don't have to. And I'm having this conversation in my head. At the same time, I am in a deeper place too. It wasn't like I wasn't connected. Felt like I was like really deep. But at the same time, I could have this conversation with myself in my head. And so then the question came from a different part, like deeper part. That was the question, for what purpose? Like, for what do I want to go home? And the first answer was, also others can do that and can meet their animal, their power animal, and their guides. And then I heard again, for what purpose? And when I really sat with it, the intention, the first intention wasn't so that others can learn. The first intention, it came out. It was an answer, and the answer was like, so, like, in other words, so you look good. So the people could admire that I have one more tool, right? And so if I brought it home, and then I could do that, I'm sure people would have benefited from it, right? But it wouldn't have been at the same level, because my intention always, it's for other people, That's the first thing that I go to. But beyond that, if it'd been reversed, for what purpose? So I could look good, right? For what purpose? So I can really help others. So the deeper intention would have been the more meaningful, and I'm giving it a meaning, right? But if I accept that, well, because I want to impress, but I also want to help people, then in that moment that it's aligned, right? Energy is always having a conversation before you don't even have to have a thought, or you don't even have to utter a word. Your energy already had a conversation with the other people's energy, right? And so sometimes when somebody's saying something, and when we're in tune with the energy, we're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just gonna want to wait and see. It's because something is not in full alignment. And more than that, like I want people to be in full alignment. I want to be aligned in as much as I'm able to, and every day, like work on that to have full alignment within myself. Right? When we're aligned in all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, there's more levels, but when we're aligned, like life tends to be easier. Life just happens for us in our favor. And just because we have our energy is more pure, for lack of a better description. And energy is always pure, but if you want a relationship and then you're also heartbroken, then you might attract another relationship that has those things. You have a relationship, but also it can be heartbreaking, right? And so when you're fully aligned, intentionally aligned, like the intention is the same in all places, then you can attract in a way that's easier, but also in a way that it's in more alignment, better fit. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I would say always question yourself for what purpose. Not to criticize or put down, but so that you can get aligned.
Are you giving this me advice?
To anyone. I mean, I'm having a conversation with you, so I'm looking at you instead of looking at the camera. But you said who?
But yes, I can take it too.
Right. When you said, like, what advice would you give anyone? That's the first thing I thought of. Like the alignment, seek the truth. You talked about the truth, right? And you talked about the truth. Like, I think there are some things that are inherently truthful or truth, like universal laws, right? Like gravity, like things like that they're true for everyone, but they're not truth for humans, but they're it's what is, right? But as feel as the truth, there's not one truth other than that when it comes to humans. Anything is true,
but
you
even
can't able to prove it untrue in a different context.
But even gravity has many truths to it as well, because some people might say it is this thing, or it's made of these particular particles. So there's many truths in all the truths of even just that. So yeah.
Right. But they seem to have more. I mean, if you look at like all the little pieces of everything, but like you throw something up in the air, it's going to come back. It's going to come down. Unless like you have a drone or something like that. But there's a mechanism that's making it fly, so then that doesn't pertain to it. But so I think there's some universal truths. Mostly, truth is subjective.
I agree. That's what I think.
Yeah. And whatever is true for you.
And also whatever is true for me now won't be true for me in 5 years. Yeah. Whatever experiences. Yeah.
Maybe even tomorrow. Right.
Yeah. So being fluid with it.
Yeah.
And allowing.
Like when I first started.
And that was important for my journey too. Like learning from so many different teachers and not just taking the one. I think that allowed me to uncover even deeper truths than I would have if I stopped at just the Buddhists and stayed there.
Yeah.
And hung on to it. So it's a process of uncovering, always.
Yeah,
for the rest of my life.
When I started my spiritual path, and I felt so good, and everything was love and light. Everything was light, and like, negative people, and blah, blah, like all that stuff, and everything was a sign, yes. And everything was a sign, and I was like really happy, right? And in that moment, I believed it to be true. In retrospect, I can, like, hindsight's 2020, right? So now I can look and I'm like, man, I was like full of baloney. Like that was a facade, because underneath I still had some pain, some sadness, a void, like, and then so the truth. Like there was a time in my life when I was depressed, and the moment I didn't recognize it. It wasn't until later, right, that I was like, man, I was depressed. I functioned well, but I was depressed. right? But to have acceptance of that, like there's some days sometimes that I sit there and I'm not feeling as good, but I'm able to see, and I put that blind on. Then I'm like, okay, today is the day that I just sit here and do this, or I'm, whatever. Tomorrow is a different day. And when I give myself permission to be that, then the next day is better, or the next moment is better. Right. So, but then again, going back to that, for what purpose? For what reason? What do I really want? And to be like so honest with yourself and not to blame. Right. Not to say, oh, there's something wrong with you. But when you see that and you're like, oh, okay.
So, if somebody wanted to work with you, is there a way they could find you?
Yes.
Or a way they could reach out to you?
Yes, there's a website. If you go to Sonya with a Y, SonyaArias.com, there's a website, and there's information on the website, an email or a phone number that can reach me at.
Okay. And you offer sessions?
I offer individual sessions, or there's packages and people can purchase, or also I do group work.
Like workshops
or classes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, teaching. Or events or trainings. Yeah,
beautiful. Anything else you'd like to say?
Be gentle with yourself. Right?
I'm gonna cry.
Yeah. Everyone, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
I think that
definitely. So when I was 19, I went through that rough patch of like the death. And I talk about it was the breakdown right before the breakthrough. Mm-hmm. And it led to so many beautiful experiences and meeting people like you and like Herein and the festivals and everything. And I'm definitely, I feel like I'm in that ending and the new beginning at this moment. So I think when you said be gentle with yourself, I felt it because I was like, I definitely am in that very sensitive space where so many things are falling off. And I was recently watching a podcast. It's called The Diary of a CEO. And she was the certified marketing officer for Netflix. And she was talking about how many struggles that she's been through in her life. And how she definitely feels like the phoenix rising, but it's not always so beautiful. Like sometimes you have to pluck all the feathers off and let them all go. And then relearn how to walk. And it's a process of retransforming when you fall. And so now I'm right now in the place of picking off the feathers.
Yeah, a lot of the times, like right before the breakthrough, there is the breakdown, there is the chaos or pain, or the way that I say it too is the ego is putting up the biggest fight, because you are, metaphorically speaking, there's the you who is now you that's dying to give way to the new you. Yeah, like if you're wanting something different, you have to become that person that can allow the space for that something that's different, right? And so there's chaos, there's pressure, that in the pressure it pushes us to the other side. Stay the course. That's usually right before you have an expansion.
Yeah. Incredible experiences are about to happen.
So
be excited.
Be gentle with yourself and stay in with yourself and stay the course. Because in that moment of pressure, we're about to break through, and sometimes what happens, it feels like it's too much and we revert. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, if we go back, it's even more painful because it becomes tighter, right? It's more dire, or we have less tolerance for whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me and Sonya today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the very first podcast. Eventually, I'd like to kind of let me wipe the tears off first. Eventually, I'd like to have a podcast studio where I can bring different teachers of different avenues to kind of share with other people the many facets of this field, because there are so many that I've learned and have gained a greater understanding from. And this is what my journey has been, is just asking these kinds of questions, and now this is in a new format to where I can put it into something that I can share with other people too. So I'm excited for what's coming. This is just the beginning, and it'll get better from here. So
Thank you.
Thank you for being the first one.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you.